Since we introduced this law that required that transparency, that unexplained premium has been reduced by more than 60%, which is about 8 cents a liter for British Columbians. So we know that shining a light on these practices can reduce prices, and they will have to report and continue to report to the Utilities Commission in the post-carbon tax environment about why they're charging what they're charging, so that British Columbians know if they're getting gouged or not. Other provinces have taken the step of regulating the price of gas, like New Brunswick. We're not at that stage. We think transparency is the place to ensure that oil and gas companies are held accountable through this process.
This is about to put a $2 billion hole into your budget. How are you going to offset the losses of the carbon tax revenues, and how quickly can you do it?
Well, we'll be restructuring significant parts of the Clean BC program. This is a program that assisted businesses and individuals to reduce their own carbon footprint and often save money in the process as well, switching from natural gas to a heat pump, for example. And so we're going to have to make some of those changes. There are other pieces of the carbon tax that offset cuts to the corporate tax rate as well as the individual tax rate. We are not going to be increasing those taxes to make up the difference. What we are doing is a review of all government programs to ensure that we're delivering programs as efficiently as possible and getting back to balance on the budget. People will not be receiving the climate action tax credit going forward. This is significant for many British Columbians. That payment will not be happening anymore as a result of the elimination of the carbon tax.
Next, we have a question from Katie DeRosa, CBC.
Premier, why wait until the last day to force this through? The opposition parties are saying there's little time to debate. Why couldn't this have been done earlier so that there is time to properly flesh this out?
The federal government, following the federal leadership race, the new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, as his last act before becoming candidate Mark Carney, passed an order in council through his new cabinet, which removed federal law that required us to maintain the carbon tax here in British Columbia by zeroing out that backstop. It's a bit technical, but there's a federal law that required us to have the carbon tax in place. I will say that while there were certainly campaign commitments made about the carbon tax by various candidates at the federal level, they moved very quickly to zero that tax, and we have responded just as quickly. It was about 10 days ago that that we made the announcement. It was almost immediately following Mr. Carney's zeroing out of the tax. The legislation was introduced on the first day back of the Legislative Assembly, and we're getting it passed to make sure that British Columbians get that relief at the pumps and see the benefit of the elimination of the carbon tax as quickly as possible.
And to Katie for a follow-up.
On the Health Authority review, you have been critical in the past of PHSA and sort of the perception of what critics say is a bloated bureaucracy. Can you speak to why that was the first health authority to be looked at? And do you think the public is sort of fed up with the number of executives, 7 at PHSA, who are making over $300,000 a year?
The commitment that I made to British Columbians during the election campaign, and the commitment that I continue to make and that I intend to keep, is that we are going to preserve frontline services for British Columbians, make sure that they get the medical care that they need. But what we're going to go after are those administrative costs in delivering that health care. When we look to the health authorities, we expect them to be lean. We expect them to be operating in a way that delivers and focuses resources on those frontline services. And that's what the work that's happening at PHSA is going to deliver. The other piece that I've been concerned about with health authorities, and Dr. Ballum, who is doing this work for us at PHSA, is well aware of my concern, is that the frontline voices of healthcare workers haven't been able to come forward in the way that I think they need to ensure that the system runs efficiently. The anxiety that I have is that the people who see the day-to-day of our healthcare system, they have suggestions about how to make it better, but they haven't been able to bring that forward. So we're going to try to eliminate as much of the layer between government and the frontline health workers as we can, so that we can deliver a healthcare system that works for everybody.
Next, we have a question from Rob Buffum, CTV.
Oh, hi, Premier. I'm wondering, kind of a two-parter, the consumer side of this that you've announced that you're getting rid of as of midnight tonight. The Conservatives provincially say they have concerns with the way this bill is structured. There's room for it to come back. Can you guarantee the consumer portion of the tax is gone? And as for the industrial side, my colleague Vaughn pointed out in this chart, there's things like I don't know, jet fuel that's being lowered to zero, somebody might say, well, that's not something consumers are generally using. What are you doing about the industrial side? Saskatchewan's gotten rid of it altogether. What are you going to do? Yeah.
Yeah, we have something called output-based carbon pricing for big companies, for big polluters. And some of these are industries like the concrete industry, oil and gas industry, mining sector. And what we do is we work with them to ensure that the level's set at a level that incents them to adopt technologies that reduce their pollution, but don't chase those jobs to other jurisdictions where there are no restrictions. There's no benefit to us to importing concrete from Indonesia, where there's no carbon price. And so it's finding that balance with industry. We need them to reduce their emissions. We need them to be maintaining British Columbia's reputation as one of the cleanest jurisdictions in North America, leading on clean technology and its implementation. And we need those jobs to be here in the province as well. So it is an industry by industry approach. We're going to continue to take that. We're going to push them to be the cleanest possible, to create and keep jobs in the province. And that's the work that we're going to continue to do with industry.
We have a follow-up from Rob Buffum.
You're listening
as I
to Premier
understand,
David
you called
Eby,
this a
who's
conference
responding to questions now about the BC carbon tax and his government introducing legislation today and hoping to pass it to repeal the consumer side of the carbon tax. It has passed first reading so far. He also said, as you heard in response to a question about the industrial carbon tax, he talked about the way that those levels are determined, and that is based on working with the industries, including oil and gas and mining, to determine levels that would be an incentive to reduce carbon emissions. And he also said there that people will no longer receive the climate action tax credit as a result of repealing the consumer carbon tax. Well, we're asking you, what do you think of this? Is this a good move? You can call us now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or you can just hit pound 690, or email bctoday@cbc.ca. Now, the stances from the opposition parties may be complicating things. BC Conservative leader John Rustad says his party will support the legislation, but only if industry doesn't take a bigger tax hit. Now, he spoke earlier with CBC's Katie DeRosa.
If this bill that they're going to introduce to get rid of the carbon tax is simply a bill to get rid of the entire carbon tax, certainly that's something we would do. If it's just to get rid of the consumer carbon tax, we're interested in supporting it if it is not has these additional clauses that David Eby wants to do, which is to be dramatically increasing the carbon tax on industry. Industry is in trouble. Obviously, is what's going on south of the border creates big problems. And if David Eby is just going to pass this tax on to industry and hide it for consumers, no, we won't support it. But if he's honestly going to be getting rid of the consumer tax for consumers, yes, of course, that's what we want to see happen.
Meanwhile, the BC Green Party says there are no signs of a plan to offset lost revenue. MLA Rob Botterill was a dissenting vote today. He's the Green Party MLA for Saanich North and the Islands.
Well, we're focused on the removal of the consumer tax, and we're really very concerned as the Green Caucus, as should be all British Columbians, that what we see here is if this goes through, it'll be a $3 billion hole in this year's budget. And we already have an $11 billion deficit to contend with. And we haven't heard anything about a plan to actually do the climate fight and to replace this measure with a suitably appropriate alternate measure. So it's like we're dealing with one part of the puzzle, axe the consumer tax, when you need to plan and deal with these other two.
Now, MLAs are going to have a long day. They're set to sit until 9 p.m. with the aim of debating and passing this legislation in a single day. David Eby's government is seeking accelerated consideration to pass this legislation in one day. That's after a 2-week break in this legislature sitting. And the NDP House Leader Mike Farnworth says the bill meets the legislative requirements for fast tracking, and its passage is, he says, a matter of confidence for the government. Well, let's hear what Stuart Prest, UBC political scientist, has to say.
Okay, so one of the things is that may be complicating this, and I want to get your opinion on it, is the Conservatives say that they don't want the government to pass on the carbon tax to industry, and the Greens say they want an alternative to the carbon tax. So how do you think that will play into the government trying to pass this bill?
Well, I think we know that the Conservatives have been pretty clear they intend to oppose this government at every turn. So I don't know that there's anything the NDP could do to bring aboard the Conservatives to support this bill. But it is interesting that line of not wanting to pass costs onto industry is in some ways going even further than where we see federal Conservatives, where we do see some interest in having some kind of industrial tax for heavy emitters. But in terms of the Greens, this is somewhat more complicated, because while the NDP can, in theory, get something through the legislature without the support of Greens, it is going to be a messy thing. It may involve votes cast by the Speaker to break ties. And so I think the NDP would really want to avoid that situation. That's why they have this agreement to cooperate with the Greens. But that means then that this legislation is going to have to be a little more substantive than just repealing the consumer carbon tax. It's going to have some kind of a concrete plan to replace it, and that's going to be harder to do on this short timeline.
That's UBC political scientist Stuart Press. And we are still watching David Eby's press conference and to see what further details will be coming out with regard to this legislation from his responses to questions. But we're asking you as well, what do you think of the move to repeal the consumer side of the BC carbon tax effective tomorrow if the government does get this legislation passed? Do you think it's a good move? You can call us now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Stuart Press, by the way, was speaking with CBC reporter Yasmin Ranea there. Basil is calling us from Port Coquitlam. What are your thoughts on this, Basil?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the important topic. We have got to do something about our climate. And cutting out all these carbon taxes may sound good, or we'll have more money for other things, but that's not important. The most important crisis of our day is the climate. If we don't do anything about the climate, we're going to have major disasters coming our way. We've seen them already, and it's going to be even worse. Don't we love our children? Do we really love our children and grandchildren? If we did, we would make sure we do something about the climate. And therefore, if they're going to cut it out, let's replace it with something even better and stronger. And so we control the industries, we control the driving in our cars, we cut down on pollution, and so we can help every living creature on this our planet.
Basil, thank you very much. That's Basil in Port Coquitlam. Our next caller is Chris on the line in Richmond. Your thoughts on scrapping the consumer side of the carbon tax in BC, Chris?
Hi.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm worried that it's actually quite an opportunity, I think, because with removing this carbon tax, we have a giant, $600 million hole in TransLink. I rely on one of the buses are getting cancelled here in Richmond. So I think it's an opportunity to maybe, and I hate to say this, introduce a new tax to fund TransLink, because if it gives people more money, maybe that opens up new room for people to be able to afford this. And also think about it another way. If we introduce more bus service, that can help reduce our reliance on cars and so on. Those emit so much carbon. It might even be better for the environment if we invest this into public transit.
Of course, TransLink looking at that funding crisis on its own as well. So you're saying you're concerned about funding for public transit, and what about a specific tax? We know that people have opposed things like congestion pricing in the past.
Yeah. So I know one thing we're seeing with this new carbon tax is that the price of gas is going to come down. Mm-hmm. I think they're saying it's going to be 17 cents.
According to the province,
maybe we can introduce a 16-cent tax on, and this will be massively unpopular, but So is cutting transit, right? It's the lesser of two evils, I think, if we introduce some kind of alternate tax to fund transit, and it might even be better for the environment. So yeah.
Chris, thank you so much for the call in Richmond. Darren is on the line in North Delta now. What are your thoughts on repealing the consumer carbon tax in BC?
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I've conflicted thoughts on it because I don't necessarily agree with them, like what the previous caller said. I don't necessarily agree with them taking away efforts to combat climate change. But at the same time, I drive every day for work. I like 20 minutes. I have no easily transit accessible way to get to work. I work down in White Rock from where I am. And so it's like filling up every week. And to save money on that, because of how high the prices are in BC, I cross the border. Like,
really?
I just fill up down in Blaine. Yeah. And you're saving, I'm saving 40 cents a liter on average filling up down in Blaine. And I would love to not have to go back and forth every week to do that, just to save some extra cash. But so it's just like this horrible catch-22, it feels like. And
yeah.
So
how far would a 17-cent decrease in the price at the pump go for you then?
I mean, because I'm always checking the exchange rate, and especially with the political climate down in the States right now, it makes me more hesitant to go over the border once a week. But I have a Nexus card, so there's less scrutiny there. And if I'm honestly at my financial situation right now, and I think a lot of people are in this with the affordability crisis and housing and all that, if I'm gonna save cents here versus 30 or 40 cents over the border, I'm still going over the border. So I don't know if there's more that can be done to bring down those prices for consumers here in BC. Like they talked, we were listening to David Eby earlier, and they talked about not wanting to regulate the price,
right?
Like how it's done out east. But at the same time, it's like, it's absurd to me that we have oil sands. We have oil and gas here in Canada, and we, because of the nature of the system, we're shipping crude down to the States, it gets refined and then sent back up here. It's absurd to me that as a country, the politicians are talking about infrastructure projects, like Oliver was talking about wanting to put a pipeline across the country. Why are there not conversations happening about building the infrastructure here in Canada to refine our own product? Like we produce, there's so much oil and gas resources here. We should be producing more than enough to supply our own needs as a country first, and then exporting other products. Like I know there's a lot of back-end stuff. It's all set up to deal with the heavy crudes, and it would take a lot of retooling to make it so that we could actually refine it and then export it. But I don't know. It just feels like a mess.
And we've heard that point about going back and building refineries once again, and we've seen that number decrease here in BC. Darren, thank you so much for sharing, where you're coming from on this in North Delta. Mohammed is next in Victoria now too. Hi, Mohammed. Hi, Mohammed. Can you hear me? Let's move on to Liz in Victoria. Hi, Liz. What are your thoughts on repealing the carbon tax for consumers?
Oh, hi there. I'm a member of the Victoria Transit Riders Union. I've called in before. I'm in favor of anything that reduces the burden on the working class. I just don't agree with the BC Conservatives that industry doesn't have the money to do important things that need to happen in society. Our position is that we need to tax the super wealthy and large corporations, and we need to actually make transit free. So I think to offset the impact of losing this tax that was supposed to affect our carbon emissions, why not tax industry at a level that we know they can handle? They're harvesting tons of cash from the working class people at every turn. They're doing quite well, many of them, and use that money so that people can take the bus for free and get more cars off the road.
More on expanding transit. Liz, thank you so much. And I think we do have Mohammed in Victoria. Hi, Mohammed. I think we have lost, our connection to Mohammed in Victoria. But thank you very much for all of your calls and thoughts on the news for today from the provincial government saying they were introducing legislation to repeal the carbon tax for consumers in BC. And again, the province hoping to pass that in time to be effective tomorrow. And we've seen it pass first reading already with one dissenting vote from Green Party MLA Rob Botterill. More on this story throughout the day here on CBC. You can always email us as well with your thoughts on this. That's bctoday@cbc.ca. It's 12:27. To the federal election now, and Markham-Unionville Liberal candidate Paul Chiang has apologized for controversial comments he made to Chinese language media. Now, he had suggested people turn in Conservative candidate Joe Tay to the Chinese consulate to collect a bounty. Liberal leader Mark Carney says this was a lapse in judgment, and Chiang will remain a candidate under the Liberal banner, which his opponents did not take kindly to.
Veteran policeman, Mr. Chiang is a veteran policeman with more than a quarter century of service to his community. 28 years of defending rights in this community, and he will continue with his candidacy going forward, having made those apologies very clearly to the individual, to the community, and moving forward to serve.
Yes, he must be disqualified. I find it incredible that Mark Carney would allow someone to run for his party that called for a Canadian citizen to be handed over to a foreign government on a bounty, a foreign government that would almost certainly execute that Canadian citizen.
For Mark Carney to say that I'm going to accept this candidate really sends a message that that type of commentary ultimately is acceptable because he's not removing him as a candidate. Ultimately saying that for the folks out there that are worried and afraid, the folks that are living with that constant fear, you know what? You're less important to me, and what's more important to me is my party.
You heard there from, Mark Carney, Pierre Poilievre, and Jagmeet Singh. We're going to have more on this after the news update, and we'll speak to Fairchild TV commentator Jimmy Yan. That's coming up right after the CBC News Update. It's just about 12:30 now. You're with BC Today here on CBC, on Radio 1, live streaming as well on your CBC News app, and of course on CBC Television. I'm Michelle Elliott. Very nice to be back with you today after spring break. Well, thanks so much for being with us as well. Coming up, we are going to talk to Fairchild TV commentator Jimmy Yan on the federal election story, which is, again, calls from opposition, from the other parties running in the federal election to remove and rescind the candidacy of Liberal candidate Paul Chiang. We're going to hear more about that coming up right after the CBC News Update. And we'll hear about the World Happiness Report and why Canada is slipping. So what are the factors that contribute to happiness in a society? We'd love to hear from you on that as well. Right now, it is time for that CBC News Update. And here's Rob Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. The provincial government has introduced a bill to scrap the consumer carbon tax. The BC Conservatives and Greens are upset the government waited until the last day to push the bill through, leaving little time for questions on a highly technical proposition. The bill would drop the tax rate to 0%, saving drivers about 17 cents per litre on fuel. Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is promising Canadians free energy-saving home retrofits. Says 2.3 million low-income households would benefit from heat pumps, air sealing, and fresh insulation. Another 1 million households could get low-cost loans and grants. And BC's Health Ministry says the Provincial Health Services Authority was selected as the first to undergo a review of its services. It says the purpose of the province-wide review of all health authorities is to ensure resources are being allocated to meet patient needs and to minimize unnecessary administrative spending. And now the BC forecast on the north coast. Sunny this afternoon with a high of 11. Highs around 8 with lots of sunshine in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 10. Highs from 7 to 11 with showers in the west Kootenay. Sunny breaks in the east Kootenay. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, a high of 11 with showers and a risk of thunderstorms. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, cloudy this afternoon. There's a slight chance of showers with highs around 12. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
It's nice to see you, Rob.
Thanks, Michelle. It has. You had a good break?
I did. I went traveling. Went to the Philippines and Japan.
Wow. That's awesome. Was that great?
Oh, it was wonderful.
Nice.
I plan to be very annoying and just talk about my vacation for the next
We
few
would
weeks.
love to hear about it.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Because it's coming.
Just not on air, all right?
You know, in Japan.
Just tip of the day, yeah.
Rob, thanks very much.
Sure.
Nice to see you. That is Rob Zimmerman from the CBC Vancouver newsroom. It is 12:32 now, and to the federal election now. The chorus of calls is growing for the Liberals to dump Toronto area candidate Paul Chiang. Now, in January, Chiang told Chinese language media that people could collect a bounty by turning in a Conservative candidate in a nearby riding to the Chinese consulate. There was a $184,000 Canadian dollar bounty that was put on candidate Zhou Tai, by Hong Kong police in December for allegedly violating China's national security law. Now, 40 Hong Kong pro-democracy groups are calling for Chiang's resignation. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and NDP leader Jagmeet Singh are also joining that call for Chiang to be canned. But this morning, Liberal leader Mark Carney said he views it as a teachable moment. Now, Jimmy Yan is a commentator at Fairchild Radio and TV in Vancouver, and he joins me now, and he's commenting as a figure in Chinese language media. Hello, Jimmy. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Michelle, for having me.
Can you describe, first of all, why Liberal candidate Paul Chiang would have told people to turn in a Conservative candidate, Zhou Tai, to the Chinese consulate?
I really can't, because number one, even though I'm a radio host in a Chinese language radio channel, but however, that's the first time I heard such a comment, and just only by the time he actually apologized. So number one, I would say before the program, you mentioned this is controversial. To me, this is categorically wrong. So he should be actually punished, if not by the party, but at least by voters.
So the apology that he's issued doesn't go far enough.
No, I think apology accepted it, but however, just because you apologize doesn't mean you're the good candidate, because you were a former police officer, RCMP officer. By saying this, it's very appalling, and also it's incredible, actually.
Tell us, first of all, just so people understand this story, why was there a bounty on the Conservative candidate in the first place?
I think, okay, based on what I learned, is actually in Hong Kong, and Zhou Tai is just one of more than a handful of those ones who, because they have spoken freely and against the Hong Kong government and then pro-democracy, then they are accused for violation of national security. I think they call it ordinance. And in Hong Kong. And so therefore, however, just because someone's actually accused for, say, a crime in Hong Kong doesn't make it criminality in Canada. So therefore, there's no case. And as a Canadian, to have Zhou Tai as a candidate in Canada, I'm proud of that.
And you called Paul Chiang's comments appalling just now. Can we go ahead? Go ahead.
It's totally wrong, categorically wrong. So there's no, of course, he should apologize. But to say that as an MP candidate, right, and a former MP, and also someone with 3 medals, right? I saw that, I didn't tell the details, but however, 3 medals on his lapel, and I really cannot accept this type of behavior.
How inappropriate is it?
Well, again, like this is a federal election time, and also in the beginning of January, and there is awareness. This is not a surprise that we're going to have an election, right? So it by then, and there is a reasonable expectation there is an election, and then Joe Tay is a political, say, opponent, right? Just having an opponent, and so take the person to the consulate general. I'm not even sure the consulate general is aware of that kind of comment, and then. Well, and to receive reward, and as a Canadian, an MP is supposed to defend not only his constituents but also all Canadians, and I find that very, it's very disturbing. Yeah.
So what do you make then of Mark Carney saying, he finds the comments offensive, but is going back on Paul Chiang's record and history as an officer and as a politician, and says this can be seen as a teachable moment? What do you make of how he's approaching this?
Well, I respect as party leader, Liberal Party, and has this kind of a very different approach, right? And different from the Conservative Party and also NDP. But again, like this whole behavior in the comment remarks are not acceptable. So therefore, I think the real question is how we can actually find the right representative. And just because this Paul Chiang has a Chinese face doesn't make this person this issue kind of a China issue. I think Joe Tan's accusation in Hong Kong is, but just Paul Chiang. Paul Chiang is a regular Canadian kind of a politician, and we don't need such a politician.
So should he,
regardless, ethnicity background,
should he be removed as a candidate then?
I think so. Yes, and I'm not saying this now. I said this one Saturday on a YouTube program already. Yeah.
Yeah. What impact do you think this might have on the election?
Well, of course, and then the election now, Liberals may have a chance again, but it seems like now, at least like this is a positive for Joe Tay, and but however, I think voters in Ontario and in each riding, I think it's better to know your candidate. Just because someone's running for the office, to me, doesn't mean the person is righteous, this person qualifies for the position. So by talking to these individuals and then double checking, their backgrounds, I think that's important. That rings the bell, because just Paul Chiang had medals. Paul Chiang was a police officer, doesn't make Paul Chiang a qualified MP.
What are you hearing from your audience over at Fairchild Radio and TV?
Yeah, that's right. So because I have this radio program, so I can talk to a broader audience. So far, I would say we don't hear much from the Chinese language media, just because I believe there is a waning kind of a moment, because the language, the press in Chinese language is actually, declining. And so therefore, there aren't that many column articles, editorials anymore. And Chinese voters are same as other Canadians. They are pretty multilingual and very diverse now. So I would say just talk to any person who you think look like Chinese, and then ask about the issue, probably give you a better ideas. But so far, I haven't heard anything say, oh, Paul Chiang said that right, we should do that. Never. Not a single word like that. Not even close. Yeah.
Okay, so the coverage has diminished.
Yes, that's just simply because the platform, some articles cannot be published on the Chinese language application, and the accounts will be suspended. So there are natural kind of a disadvantage on the Chinese language media. YouTube is different because you're free to say whatever you like. So I think you may find more diversified opinions on YouTube. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Jimmy, thank you so much. Good to speak with you and hear your comments on this. Jimmy Yan, a commentator at Fairchild Radio and TV in Vancouver, and he spoke to us as a media personality. It's 12:40 now. You're with BC Today. And thanks for joining us here on BC Today on CBC. Of course, we're live streaming on the CBC News app. We're live on CBC Radio 1 and the YouTube BC CBC account as well. And if you were in Vancouver last night or watching as well on television, the Juno Awards held last night was certainly momentous. It not only delivered some big wins, but also a lot of love for Canada. As this morning, CBC Screen Time columnist Eli Glasner stopped by the early edition to give a recap of the highlights. And here's what he had to say about host Michael Bublé and Lifetime Achievement winner Anne Murray.
Loves, I think, the mission of the Juno, and he is very much a proud Canadian. And if anything, like, he set the tone from the get-go as the show opened. Take a listen.
We are the greatest nation on earth. And we are not for sale.
She told this amazing story how, you know, when she was blowing up, when she was kind of like the Tate McRae of her time, there were people, come to New York, come to LA, like, you know, you gotta move. Exactly. Yeah. And again, what did she have to say about why she stayed home?
Canada was my safe haven, my safety blanket, my light at the end of the tunnel, and it still is. Thank you very much.
Well, what makes you happy? Every year, the World Happiness Report ranks happiness among different nations around the world. And this year, Canada has dropped to 18th from last year's 15th. And the report says Canada is among the big losers in happiness rankings over the last couple of decades. Now, these rankings are based on people rating their own lives using variables like health, social support, and freedom to make life choices. We're asking you, what are the factors that lead to happiness and what makes for a happy society? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also hit pound 690 on your phone. John Helliwell is co-editor of the World Happiness Report and professor emeritus at UBC's Vancouver School of Economics. John, very nice to speak with you again.
Nice to be here.
Well, I'll talk about the report in a moment, but I want to just kind of broaden out and ask you how it was for you to be talking about happiness right now amid a very stressful news cycle.
It's exactly the right time. Because we get this negativity bias coming in where people simply don't understand the quality of the people among them. They're driven into a situation where they're under threat and they band together, but they band together against rather than with. And so to learn, as we emphasized in this year's report, that other people are really much kinder than you think they are. And the key evidence we had was that the actual return of lost wallets in experimentally dropped wallets around the world is twice as high as people think it is. So people really don't understand what a kind world they live in, and it affects them. They're more likely to treat a stranger as an enemy. They're more likely to put up their defenses against others and less likely to try and make common cause and reach solutions.
Okay, and that is an interesting example you give, because you give that example of whether people believe that if they lost their wallet, it would actually be returned. And most are skeptical that that's going to happen. I would imagine, yes, I would not be wanting to just randomly lose my wallet and believe, yeah, that's going to come back to me.
You're right. The interesting thing was the BBC picked this up last week, and they went over to Belfast, which is the happiest part of the UK, and they experimentally dropped 10 wallets. And they were delighted, but surprised that all 10 were returned.
That is surprising. And why is that a measure of happiness then?
What's a measure of what contributes to happiness, i.e. how people value their own lives, is whether they think they live in a society where other people care about them, where they're watching their back, where they're like family rather than like strangers, and whether they would pick up your wallet and go out of their way to deliver it back to you is a very good measure of that. So we have, for all the world country, 140 plus countries, a measure of how likely people think it would be for their wallet to be returned. And we find that's an enormously powerful explanatory factor in how they think about their lives. It's bigger in its effect than whether they're unemployed or not. It's more than an effect of a doubling of income.
Really?
It's than the effect of feeling that the streets are unsafe or that your own mental health is at risk. Very important. So there's one of the basic things that underlies the World Happiness Report, and that's why it's a happiness report, not an unhappiness report, is that the existence of the positives is much more important for how people think about their lives than the absence of negatives.
Tell me more about what you did find in your report. What did people say about whether they felt they had a social support around them, or freedom, or health and well-being?
Well, what we've seen, and Canada's movement in this is part of the story, is that in the mainly Anglophone countries, because it happened much more in English Canada than in Quebec, there has been a real drop in how young people, those under 30, think about the world. It's true of all levels of the population. It's sort of to juxtapose what I'm now telling you with what we heard from Michael Bublé, says, it's not good to boast about whether you're the best country or not. You should be proud of yourselves and working together without feeling you have to be better than everybody else. And in particular, Canada used to be above Finland, and Finland is now the happiest country in the world. It pays us to look and see what we could be doing better in order to make ourselves happier, not because we want to beat the Finns, but because we want to be happy.
Now we're going to be wearing jerseys to compete on happiness. Let's ask people what they think could be done better in order to achieve happiness. What do you think are the factors that lead to happiness, and what makes for a happy society? Love to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone as well. And
we also ask them, Michelle, what they see in their lives about the kindness of strangers.
Yeah.
Because I'd really like to hear whether they think it's really important to them that these things happen, and what's their experience.
Yeah. Do you think your wallet would be returned if you lost it? Yeah. Tell us about your belief, your perception of the level of kindness around you as well. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Jan is calling us from Texada Island. Hi, Jan.
Hi. Well, on that topic of returning wallets, I'm afraid I'm a bit scatterbrained, and so I've been really fortunate to live in places where my wallet has been returned, and I've also noticed when I'm at community events that are really positive events, I just feel safe. Like I know stuff's not going to be stolen. When my daughter was little, nobody was going to hurt her, all that.
Feeling of safety.
But I wanted to call.
Go ahead.
Yeah, because the topic made me think right away of this article I saw called "The Politics of Happiness," and on the cover of the Yes magazine it was a photo of the mayor of Bogota at the time, Enrique Peñalosa, on a bicycle. And when he became mayor, he was advised to put in all these big freeways and so on, but instead he built more parks. He had car-free days and more pedestrian and cycling and active transportation infrastructure. And he said, this tells people they matter. No matter what their income is, they matter to us. And it shows respect to people. And what was really interesting is Bogota, known for crime, its crime rate went down. So that really impressed me, and there's still information about that online. And his brother, I think, lives in Toronto, Gil Peñalosa, and is also involved in, positive ventures to make places more happy.
That's so interesting, Jan, because here I was thinking you were going to talk about the way that riding bikes and being outdoors contributes to happiness, but you're saying it's that feeling of this is something we're building for you, regardless of your socioeconomic status. Like you are someone who matters.
Yeah, but on that topic, I don't actually have a car, and so I do everything by bike, or I ask friends for help if I have something too big. And, just being fit and so on, yeah, it does certainly contribute to happiness, that's for sure.
Well, Jan, thank you so much for the call. And I'm glad that you have had your wallet returned. See, that's very affirming, isn't it, John?
Absolutely.
Denise is on the line now in Surrey. What do you think makes for a happy society, Denise?
I think in general, if you go through something in your life that could be challenging, and in my case, I went through breast cancer, and I think it makes you stop, and I put happiness and gratitude in the same sort of space. Mm-hmm. And if you hold space for that every day and you look at things differently, so I feel like when we as human beings are up for a challenge or a crisis or something, if we just take something out of our day that we're grateful, that makes us happy. So I think just as people talk about just taking something very simple from our day, whether it be outside for a walk or out in nature, or bike riding that the caller before spoke about, but just being really, I think being grateful helps with making yourself happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Denise, thank you very much. And thank you for sharing, your journey and as a breast cancer survivor. Really good to hear from you.
And gratitude turns out is a really important source of happiness, but the really way it really has extra muscle is when you communicate it to the people you're grateful for, making that step of telling them what they meant to you and their help. One more thing that picks up on illness and recovery. What really makes people happy is doing things with other people, for other people. And everyone been through recovery paths knows that to have a helping hand is really important. Turns out the happiness benefits are even bigger for the people who are helping than the people who are helped.
Wow.
And so being that positive circle of helping grow is a really big source of happiness.
Again, yeah, that sense of social support. Chris is next now in Kamloops. Hi, Chris. Welcome. What are your thoughts on what makes people and society happy?
I don't know if I can talk about what makes everybody happy, but I know
it's a big ask.
That it is. But for me, having a daily meditation practice has increased my happiness in ways I never imagined.
Wow. Why? How so?
It has helped me be more present. It has helped me understand how I move through the world and how much of my own happiness comes from within.
Great to hear that. So you meditate on this every day, Chris?
Yes, I do.
Wonderful to hear. Thank you very much for the call. And I want to wrap up with Cody in Cranbrook because you have had your wallet returned as well, Cody?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, sure can.
Okay. I'm grateful for a lot of things in this world, and there's so many wonderful people out there that have done fantastic things for me and for other people. I always try and say thank you, and have a good day to everybody. Anyway, so I'll keep the story short. This was about 30 years ago, and I was working in a little community, a little village out by Nelson called Meadow Creek. And I was doing silviculture and forestry work. I went to town, cashed my paycheck, went back to our camp. We were living literally in tents and whatnot. And the only place that you could socialize with anybody was in this little pub. And so I went out and I called my wife and just checked in with her. And then I went back to my camp. And when I got back, I realized that I didn't have my wallet. And I was missing like almost $1,000 in cash in my wallet.
Wow.
And so I went back to the pub. I looked around, couldn't find anything. Nobody could help me. So I drove back to the closest town at the time, or still is Caslow. And I went there. I went to the bank, talked to everybody. Nobody could help.
And
so about 2 hours later, I went back and just decided that, or just realized that I was out an entire paycheck. And I went to call my wife again from the payphone, and on top of the payphone was my wallet. And it had all of the money in it still.
So did someone put it there, like thinking it would go back to whoever it returned it to belong to?
Well, I'm not really sure, because obviously I had been there, I had checked.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that somebody had found it and just put it back.
Yeah.
where it was.
And didn't touch the $1,000.
No.
That's amazing.
There was $1,000
Cody,
in cash in there.
Oh, you've restored my faith, Cody. Thank you very much. And John, thank you for joining us on this too. You can take that back to your report too.
Absolutely. Thanks for the evidence.